What is up, everybody? This is Josh, and today I want to give you guys a little bit of an introduction / discussion type video on a new deck that is coming out this week and is set to shake up the meta significantly, and that is of course Ryzeal releasing in Crossover Breakers. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. If you find this video helpful, I would really appreciate if you'd left a like or a comment on the video. Without further ado, let's talk about what Ryzeal does and why exactly it is going to be such a big impact, or predicted to be such a big impact on the format. And let's talk a little bit about how good it really is, because the deck also does have some weaknesses. Now, of course, before we talk in depth about how Ryzeal plays and exactly what the strengths and weaknesses of the decks are, we have to go over the cards just briefly to explain what they do. I am using OCG cards here. Since the set isn't out yet, we're gonna have to work with these. Let's go through the main deck monsters first. And of course, Ryzeal is a rank 4 focused deck. There's a lot of comparison between this deck and Sprite. Just Sprites for level 4s is what people call it. And it is kind of accurate, but obviously Sprites is a deck from 2022 and Ryzeal monsters have a little bit more tricks up their sleeves. Now, first off, we have Ice Ryzeal. Ice Ryzeal is typically a 3-of. It is a light pyro monster that has 2 separate effects. First, you can special summon it from your hand by just sending any other card from your hand or field to the graveyard, and if you do that, you are going to be locked into rank 4 Xyz monsters from your extra deck for the rest of this turn. The more relevant effect for this card, though, when you normal summon it, you get to summon any Ryzeal except Ice Ryzeal from your deck. Kind of weird that this thing can summon itself from the hand, but then it only gets its effect when normal summoned. All that really does for the deck, when you draw 2 copies of this card, you can use one as a normal summon and one as an extender, or if you draw this together with a different normal summon, you can normal summon that and then special summon this. But overall, just one of the best ways to start your combos by summoning this as your normal summon and then just tutoring out any other Ryzeal. Next up, you're going to also be seeing 3 copies of X Ryzeal, which is also a light pyro monster, and this thing you can special summon from your hand by sending an Xyz monster from your extra deck to the graveyard. If you do that, you are going to be locked into rank 4 Xyz for the rest of the turn. However, on summon, this thing also lets you search for a fire thunder monster from your deck, which the other part of the Ryzeals are fire thunders. At this point, I'm going to mention Meteorologic Aggregator because that is the prime target you're going to send from the extra deck in order to summon the X Ryzeal, and that makes this card very good going second. One thing to note is that this summon does not start a chain. You will just simply send the Meteorologic Aggregator from your extra deck to the graveyard and put the X Ryzeal onto the board, allowing you to activate its effect to search and also activate Meteorologic Aggregator to negate a card on your opponent's side of the field when you're going second. So like you can turn off field spells, annoying monsters on the board, whatever, by simply special summoning the X Ryzeal, and you're not even losing card advantage because it also searches for a card from your deck. Like I said, the other 2 Ryzeals that you're going to play in your main deck are going to be fire thunder monsters, one of them being Sword Ryzeal. Sword Ryzeal is a monster that lets you special summon itself when you control a Ryzeal or have a Ryzeal in your graveyard, and if you do that, you're locked into rank. On summon, normal or special summon, this guy lets you search a light pyro monster from your deck to your hand. So this guy will allow you to search for either X or Ice Ryzeal upon summon. All 3 of these guys are technically 1-card combo starters. However, it is worth noting that this one is the weakest one to start with because you would have to normal summon it if it's your only starter, and you would prefer to special summon it so you can use your normal summon for Ice Ryzeal. So overall, the combos that start with Sword Ryzeal have 1 less body generally because you will not get the summon off of Ice Ryzeal from the deck. But obviously this card is great because it is still a starter and an extender, because when you normal summon, then you can special summon it from your hand to search again. X Ryzeal and Sword Ryzeal I think are very fitting comparisons to a card like Sprite Blue, and we all know how powerful that card is. Next up, we have Node Ryzeal. This is typically a 1-of because this card is not a starter, or rather just an extender. It is still a very good card, and you're still going to see it, I think, in every single Ryzeal deck. This guy lets you special summon itself when you have an Xyz monster on the field or in the graveyard. So obviously you can see how this doesn't start anything that way, because that is something that happens later on in your turn. And then it also lets you send a card from hand or field to the graveyard to revive a Ryzeal from the graveyard in defense position, but that card has its effect negated. Purely an extender that you can just special summon from your hand and then revive something from the graveyard for more rank 4 plays. That's why it's typically only being played as a 1-of. And that is already your Ryzeal monster lineup. As far as Ryzeal and spell and traps, we've got 3 different ones to talk about. We've got the field spell Ryzeal Cross, which is typically being played as has 1 or 2 copies, depending on whether the deck uses desires or not, because it is also not a starter, but still a very powerful card. This card has 2 effects and 1 restriction. The restriction is you cannot Xyz summon monsters with the same name as monsters you already control. This is stopping you from going into multiple copies of your extra deck boss monsters. There are ways around it, and typically it's not a big deal, you know, it's just something to be aware of. The main 2 effects of this cards are you can shuffle back 2 Ryzeals, or not shuffle, you put them to the bottom of the deck from your graveyard to draw a card, so you're getting some nice recursion. The more important effect is that you can negate a monster effect that resolves by detaching a Xyz material from a Ryzeal Xyz you control. The important part about this card is that that happens in resolution, so you don't have to declare that you're going to use this when the effect is activated or anything like that. You can just say like, oh, you're activating a monster effect? Okay, in resolution, when your opponent can't do anything about it anymore, I'm simply going to detach an Xyz material and negate that effect. Next up, we've got Ryzeal plugin. Ryzeal plugin lets you revive a Ryzeal monster and then attach a Ryzeal card from your deck to a rank 4 Xyz monster you control. And this is one of the main ways how you can get a material onto the field in response to your opponent's monster effect activation. Next up, we've got Ryzeal Plasma Hole, which is a pretty powerful card, I would say. However, there is still some decks that don't play this card. Usually you see it as a one-of. It lets you target face-up cards your opponent controls up to the number of Ryzeal Xyz you control and destroy them. And then you can attach a Ryzeal card from your graveyard to a rank 4 you control. It also has a very relevant graveyard effect that honestly might even come up more often for you when you're playing against this deck or when you're playing the deck yourself, which is that you can banish it from the graveyard to perform an Xyz summon using a Ryzeal monster you control. And this is legitimately all the main deck Ryzeals you need to know. The only other card we're gonna have to showcase here is obviously Bonfire, because both Ice Ryzeal and X Ryzeal are pyro monsters. You can search them with Bonfire, which makes Bonfire a phenomenal card because it searches both your best starter and your best extender. Always going to be a 3-of in every single Ryzeal list. And that is it for the cards that you're gonna see in every single Ryzeal deck. It is very, very compact, 16 card core. What you do past these 16 cards is very much up to you. You can put in a lot of hand traps, a lot of board breakers if you would want to do that. You can also play other extenders or other rank 4 engines, because honestly, in these 16 cards, there's only 12 starters, and that is not the most, honestly. You would probably like to have some more. So there's options of running like the Spirit package with Aratama and Sakitama, surfacing Big Jaws plus Drake Shark from Rage of the Abyss. You can play Pot of Desires for some more consistency, all kinds of options. And I think that's really where the interesting part with Ryzeal is going to be, is seeing how players will build the deck in the perfect way. Because yes, you could just slap 24 non-engine into this at this point, but would the deck really be perfect at that point? Would it be consistent enough? Probably not. Let's talk about the extra deck cards first before we discuss all those things. There's only 2 Ryzeal Xyz monsters, and the rest is just a big toolbox of rank 4s. First up, Ryzeal Duo Drive is the one that's probably going to be summoned first. Upon summon, you can attach a Ryzeal card from your graveyard to this card as material. The more important part of this card is that you can detach 2 Xyz material from your Xyz monsters and add 2 Ryzeal cards from your deck to your hand. This card works pretty much exactly like Gigantic Sprite, where it detaches the Xyz material in resolution. If this card gets interacted with by something like a Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit and the Xyz material are no longer there, you are not able to detach them in resolution, and you also won't be able to search. What that also means is that you can also detach Xyz materials from other Xyz you have. So for example, if you have an Xyz next to it and you activate it and it gets Ghost Ogre, you can simply detach from the other Xyz. You don't have to talk about why being able to detach 2 cards and then search 2 cards is a really powerful effect for a rank 4. And this is also the reason why the spell traps are typically 1-ofs, maybe 2-ofs, because in an ideal world, if you start with any of your Ryzeal combos, this guy's going to search you all the 1-ofs that you want. The big boss monster of the deck, the one you're trying to end on every single time, is Ryzeal Detonator. Duo Drive is a generic rank 4 you can make with other level 4 monsters. This guy does require 2 Ryzeals, important to note. 3000 attack. On summon, you get to attach a card from your graveyard to it as material. That does come up because the more materials this card has, the better it is. But also, you can attach the Mereologic Aggregator that your X Ryzeal sends to the graveyard to this thing as material, which means that if you're detaching this on the opponent's turn to activate its effect, you're going to be able to negate another card on their field. This is sometimes difficult to use because of how the chain link work, right? Because you're gonna like detach it, and then in the new chain afterwards, the aggregator will activate. So it's not as easy to negate like normal spell cards with aggregator or something like that. It's not possible, but you can still maybe negate a field spell or something. Or if they activate a card that summons a different card, then you can chain detonator, detach aggregator, and then when they summon whatever, it'll trigger chain link 1 their effect, chain link 2 your effect, negate it. But here's the most important part. When your opponent activates a card or effect, you can detach a material, target a card on the field, destroy it. Not once per turn, not once per chain. So this thing is basically Zodiac Trident on steroids, because you can just chain whenever your opponent does something to destroy a card on the field. In a normal scenario, this card is going to have 3 materials because you summon it with 2 and then you attach a third one from the graveyard upon summon. This card alone presents 3 pops. And on top of that, obviously one of those detaches is going to be the aggregator. On top of all that, when an Xyz monster you control would be destroyed by battle or card effect, that effect is once per turn, by the way, you can detach a material from it instead. So if your opponent was trying like to Raigeki it, first thing they do, you can protect it once. And this is already the most important cards for the deck. Everything else in the extra deck, there's no real like huge tricks. It is just like a whole bunch of different rank 4 options that you can play. Probably a Zeus because you're playing Xyz, could be a Typhon in there as well. Maybe a utility link like Donner, Dagger for Hire, but that is for the most part just it. Let's see how this deck achieves its end boards and why it is considered so good and efficient. Let's start with a 1-card combo just to see what the deck is supposed to do. You would normal summon Ice Ryzeal, activate its effect to summon one from the deck. You would be special summoning Sword Ryzeal. Now Sword Ryzeal on summon lets you add a light pyro monster from the deck to the hand. You would be adding X Ryzeal. X Ryzeal you can then special summon by sending the Mereologic Aggregator from your extra deck to the graveyard. And then on summon, you will activate the X Ryzeal. Now it is worth noting that you can use Mereologic Aggregator here even if it's your first turn, so that you can chain block the X Ryzeal, like chainlink 1 X Ryzeal, chainlink 2 Mereologic Aggregator, target your Ice Ryzeal because it doesn't really matter. To be fair, I don't think anyone is going to Ash Blossom the X Ryzeal, but you might as well. You can do that. Just wanted to bring that up. And then obviously the X Ryzeal is going to search the Note Ryzeal because it searches for Fire Thunders. You would then overlay 2 of these to make your Duo Drive, and then you would use Duo Drive to detach 2 cards to search for 2 Ryzeal cards. This is already where we can talk about Nibiru the Primal Being. Typically you search for Ryzeal Cross and Ryzeal Plugin. Here's the important thing about playing around Nibiru with this deck. You activate Ryzeal Cross, you've summoned 4 times so far. The next step in this combo is going to be to special summon Node Ryzeal from your hand because you control an Xyz monster. Technically, you've summoned 5 times, and at the moment, you do not control an Xyz monster with material. So theoretically, you would think, oh, the Ryzeal Cross right now cannot negate the Nibiru. So if your opponent Nibirus you right here, all you'd have to do is chain Ryzeal Plugin. Ryzeal Plugin would revive a Ryzeal from your graveyard and attach a card from your deck to the Duo Drive in response to the Nibiru's activation. So when the Nibiru resolves, you are going to have a card attached to the Ryzeal Duo Drive, and you can simply negate the Nibiru. It is super crucial that you search for the field spell and the plugin. As long as you have the plugin available in your hand, your opponent basically cannot Nibiru you. And this is also why Nibiru alone is not very good against this deck, because everyone is going to play around it in this fashion. It would only work if you, for example, had an infinite impermanence next to it to stop the Duo Drive from accessing the field spell, and then they keep playing. Then Nibiru can still be okay against this deck. But even the standard 1-card combo, even though it does summon more than 5 times, does not play into Nibiru because of how good Ryzeal Cross is. So we are at this point. Now, after you've summoned the node here, there's different ways on how you can play. I found different versions of it online. The one that seemed to make the most sense to me was the one where you could use node, send the Duo Drive to revive one from the graveyard, and you'd revive like Ice here. Keep in mind, even if you get nibbed here, you can still dodge it by using plugin onto the Duo Drive, and then you'll have an Xyz monster again. I like just making Detonator here and using its effect on summon to attach the Mereologic Aggregator from the graveyard, and then set the plugin and pass. This board might not seem that great. However, what you have here is you've made this with 1 card, by the way, and your deck is probably full of a lot of non-engine, so you are likely to back this up with hand traps. But Detonator represents 3 pops. Mereologic Aggregator is able to negate a card. If your opponent interacts with your Detonator in any way, even the field spell still provides a monster negate in theory by detaching a material from the Detonator. But even more importantly, you're going to be able to use Ryzeal Plugin to revive Sword Ryzeal and attach Ryzeal Plasma Hole to the Detonator as the first thing on your opponent's turn. Now, this obviously gives you the search off of the sword for follow-up into something like X or Ice. Now, your Detonator obviously has 4 detaches to destroy a potential upwards of 4 cards. But even if your opponent uses some of those cards that people think are very good against Ryzeal, like a Ultimate Slayer onto this, it's going to go into your extra deck. All these cards are are going to be sent to your graveyard. And now that you have set up Plasma Hole in your graveyard, you can simply use the Plasma Hole and remake the detonator on summon, attach a third material, then the detonator is still here. If they don't have an out to your detonator and it just stays, what you can do is detach the Plasma Hole first action, and then that's in your graveyard, and then you can use these two bodies right here that you have. You can't make another detonator because of the field spell restriction, but you can summon all other kinds of powerful extra deck monsters, right? Like you can go into an Abyss Dweller on your opponent's turn if that's good against their deck. You can make a Baguska after they're done playing into your detonator. Like you'll detach a couple times, and once they've broken through the detonator, you can then make a Baguska to completely stop them from doing anything else. And obviously all other kinds of things are possible depending on what you put in your extra deck. You know, some people play Tornado Dragon for extra spell trap removal on the opponent's turn. People can play Trap Tricks Rafflesia because this card is actually a whole trap card. This with some extra trap holes like Gravedigger's Trap Hole to play through hand traps. All kinds of options here. Other cool things you can do, because Ryzeal Detonator can protect itself from battle. If they attack it with something that's bigger than it, you can detach to protect it, and then because an Exceeds monster has battled this turn, you can banish the Plasma Hole to put a Zeus on top of it on the opponent's turn, which can obviously be very cool and very powerful. Doesn't happen often, but is possible. This is something that is not unbreakable. It can be looked upon as a very efficient deck, but it's by no means super oppressive or super unfair. But I just want to showcase not only against like Nibiru why this deck is good into hand traps, but also like with the example of like more conventional hand traps like Imperm or Ash Blossom, and why people are kind of afraid to hand trap the first Ryzeal starter because of how good the deck plays into hand traps when you have extenders. It goes without saying that if your opponent starts with just Ice Ryzeal and does not have an extender in hand, if you just have one infinite impermanence on this, they're gonna pass the turn. That is just how it goes with some of these one card combos. If you just start one of them and you have no way to extend further, you will pass the one Imperm or one Ash or whatever. However, where it gets really impressive, and this is where one of the core strengths of the deck lies, I think, is how this deck plays with not one starter versus one hand trap, but with two starters versus two hand traps. So let's just assume our opponent has two very common hand traps in Ash and Imperm, and we have an Ice Ryzeal and a Sword Ryzeal. It can be X Ryzeal and Sword, it can be Ice and X, doesn't really matter. You're going to start with Ice. Opponent is going to Imperm it first to play around Triple Tactics Talents. I think that'd be a reasonable thing to expect. And because you have a Ryzeal monster on the board now, you can just special summon Sword and activate its effect to search. If your opponent doesn't know what's happening, they might even use the Ash Blossom here. And then of course we know what's going to happen. We know we're going to overlay these two into Duo Drive, and we're going to search two more and just keep playing like nothing happened. Let's assume they know that we can go Duo Drive and they just like don't stop the Sword Ryzeal. So we search X Ryzeal, and then they're going to go into Duo Drive. And this is, to be honest, what you should expect to hand trap most of the time against this deck. Hand trapping Duo Drive, I think, is the most efficient way to cut them off of follow up as well, because at this point, when they start two starters, you're going to see it's impossible to stop them from making Detonator. You're going to activate Duo Drive here. Now you're going to Ash it. So you've Ashed and Impermed into these, and we still have the X Ryzeal in hand. So we're going to be able to go X, send Aggregator, special summon itself, use the effect of X, search the node, and then you're going to special summon node, and you're going to be able to make the Detonator and attach the Aggregator. We've had two hand traps against two starters, and they still end on their Towers monster with 3 pops and the Aggregator negate, and they will have 3 other cards in their hand, which could be their own hand traps. And because we've used 2 hand traps, we're going to be down 2 cards. When we start our turn, we're only going to be playing with 4 cards. This is why this deck is so powerful, I think. It's because when they draw combinations of 2 cards, they can basically force every single deck into a grind game, because you can just simply not really stop this. You would need a 3rd hand trap on top of all that to even make it work. Like, of course, if you had a 3rd hand trap like in the Nibiru or something on top here, then you'd be good. Any scenario where your opponent has 2 hand traps and the Ryzeal deck draws 2 starters, it's going to be able to establish the Detonator, and it's going to force people to play into the Detonator. This is not only an advantage in my opinion. When I'm looking at this deck, and in my first couple of rounds of testing, I actually found that playing a deck with only 12 of these cards, actually chances of seeing 2 different ones to play through hand traps super easily is not that high. It's not super low either. Like, the deck is consistent and you can play some other cards, but at the end of the day, you're losing your advantage for that, right? The advantage of this deck is that you have a lot of space for non-engine. The more consistency you add, the less room for non-engine you have, and the weaker your deck becomes, like going second, for example, or just in general when you need those non-engine slots, right? Like super valuable cards to have in this format. So in a world where this deck always opens 2 Ryzeal cards and 3 non-engine, I think it is by far like the best deck in the format. But I think realistically, the deck is not going to do that super often. I think finding the right ratios and the right balance between engine and non-engine in Ryzeal is super difficult, and is also also going to define how good this deck is going to do. There's a lot of possibilities here, right? Like you can add more engine to this deck if you want to. In terms of which non-engine this deck can use, you're very, very flexible. My prediction for the upcoming format is that in the beginning, you're still going to see mostly hand traps in this deck, because obviously people will still have to be worried about playing into Snake Eyes, playing into Yugioh, and some of the cards that are good into Ryzeal, like Triple Tactics Talents or Ultimate Slayer or anything like that, those cards are just not that great into the existing decks already, right? It's going to be difficult to incorporate too many main deck cards that are good against Ryzeal when you're still worried about all those kind of decks. That is roughly an idea of how the Ryzeal deck works and what its advantages and also some of its disadvantages are. But overall, I still think this deck is very good. I think a deck that can play this amount of non-engine, like even if you add 3 or 6 more consistency cards to the deck, you're still going to be able to run like anywhere between 18 and 24 non-engine in this deck. So it's going to be very, very good. I don't think it's going to have the same position for us that it has in the OCG right now, because in the OCG, a lot of other decks are significantly weakened by ban lists. Yugioh is much weaker, Snake Eye is much weaker, Tenpai is much weaker, and Ryzeal has to compete with all of those. I think it is just another top tier deck in the mix. It is not going to be the best deck by far. I think it's just going to be a very solid addition to the format. Let me know what you guys think of this deck. Let me know if you guys thought this little presentation was helpful. I'm going to do the same for Malice. If you don't want to miss it, make sure to subscribe and leave some feedback in the comments down below. Thank you for watching. Hope it was helpful, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.